evening, everyone. Thank you for coming this evening. Thank you, Eddie, for allowing me to get up here and blabber to people for a bit. My name is Robert Dempsey, and I'm talking about using PyParsing for web scraping, application control, and data wrangling. And mainly how I'm going to do that is I've written code, I put all the code up on GitHub, and I will be going mostly through the code so you don't have to deal with watching a bunch of slides, which suck. So, first off, let's start out with a great Dilbert cartoon. I thought this applicable. Basically, he said that he's, they're looking for developers at Dilbert's company, and that totally failed.
No, I know it always does that.
Right on this Dilbert cartoon. Oh my god. Okay, great, we're back. Yeah, and he's saying, your app is checking out. You're a mansplainer with an unsuccessful dating history. Basically, the guy has no life, and he's like, oh, but you have great technical skills, right? You must have great technical skills, so you're hired. Saying that technical people have no social life. And I think that's completely false, because we're all here at a meetup. I totally count that as social life. So there you go. So if anyone messes with y'all, say I totally have a social life.
That's questionable at best.
And it's awesome. Yeah, so there you go. So anyway, again, my name is Robert Dempsey. I'm all over the internet. I have a personal blog, robertwdempsey.com, blah, 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 GitHub over there. Also, for my full-time job, I work at a company called ARPC. Their mainstay is econometrics, which most people, including myself, don't know what that even means. But when people get sued for shit tons of money, they want to know, well, how much might that shit ton be? They come to companies like ours to figure that stuff out. So like BP oil spill, tobacco litigations, NFL concussion case, they came to our company to find out how much they're going to be paying out. And I work on the infamous 4th floor of ARPC, currently doing what I lovingly term as data monkey work. Before that, I did project management, and I got hired to do marketing, and then that got cut off. And so the project management, now data stuff. And I do Python. So all of my slides tonight and all the code are freely available already on GitHub if you want to go and grab that. R Dempsey, and then you'll see PyParsing DC Python. And that's where all the code is for your enjoyment. So, first topic is PyParsing. So, PyParsing is, as it says, an alternative approach to creating and executing simple grammars. So basically it's a way to set up almost like the way that I look at it in layman's terms, which I am, is a way to basically be able to parse stuff in a much better way than, say, a whole crap ton of if statements. So if the person enters this in, or if they enter that in, or if they're searching for this or that, no, screw all that. Right? Like you can use PyParsing to basically parse input and then either control an application. You can use it for web scraping, which I don't recommend, and I'll tell you why in a little bit. So really the main ways that I use it are for application flow control. And also because, like it says here, regex makes your brain hurt and you want an alternative. I know people are like, oh yes, regex, it's extremely powerful. It is. I still can't wrap my head around it after attempting to for years. I have books, I'm like, forget it. I'd rather just deal with a parser to do that instead. So the latest version is 2.0.1. As I was explaining to this gentleman here, the easiest way to install it is just pip install PyParsing and you'll get all the good stuff. So a basic PyParsing app is you import what you need from a library. So anyone familiar with anything Python will recognize this, right? So you import the names of what you need from PyParsing. You define what you call your grammar. So you set up what it is you're going to be trying to parse, or if you're extracting text from something, like what those elements are. And we'll look at all that. You then use the grammar, which is run the code, and then you process the results. So the main elements of a grammar in PyParsing, first you have a word, which is literally, it's a word. You can use literals. So literal is, I use that a lot of times for punctuation. So you can use it for punctuation, or when I'm trying to parse through web pages with it, then you can say, literally you could have HTML elements as a literal that it's trying to look for. You have shortcuts for things which are one or more. So just like in regex, where you could say if it, say, starts with an A and has one or more letters or one or more numbers, that's exactly kind of how one or more works there. Or you can say, oh, there's just one of. So I'm looking for something that has one of and a word, which could be A, or one of literally a specific word. It's shortcuts. And then you have alphas, which are letters, excuse me. So let's look at this actually in some code, and then that's actually a much better explanation than I'm doing, just saying like that. So I have my code here. Da-da. Hello world. So I'm going the lazy route, and I'm importing everything from PyParsing, just in case. Now, I know always in Python it's recommended to not import anything that you don't have to, but really it's not that much, and I don't care. So I'm importing freaking everything right there, just in case any syntax people get on. So what I'm doing here is basically I want to be able to parse not just hello world, but a whole bunch of like different strings that might come up. So I have my input, so that's going to be this, the hello strings. I then define my grammar. So the way that I do that is I say, okay, I have this thing called a word, which is then using the PyParsing word, say it's one or more alphas plus a period. Then I have my salutation. So what I want to do here is I actually want to split up everything that's before the comma and then after the comma. So my salutation is going to be this first part of, like, basically whatever's in front of the comma. So I say, okay, the salutation can basically be a group of one or more of these words right here. I then say, okay, I want to see the comma, but in my output, I can do this cool thing, which is basically suppress. So what that does is, when PyParsing goes through the strings and starts splitting them up into the individual elements, it would see, well, a couple things could happen. It could either add the comma, like to the first word here, or whatever word it's attached to, or I can say suppress, and suppress means it won't show up in my output as an element, because ultimately I really don't care, in this instance, about having that comma there. So I'm like, all right, get rid of that comma. I then say the greetee is going to be that second part, so I have like Jude, Dude, G, Adrian, Miss Crabtree, etc. So that's going to be my greetee person. So I say, okay, well the greetee is really one or more of these words here. And going back, and it did it again. Go back.
You gotta give it a second. Wiggling, it doesn't do anything.
Wait, let them.
Well, if I'm back,
Okay. I have a really dirty mind, man. You can't say stuff like that to me. So, all right. So looking back at, at the text that I'm trying to parse, so I have a dot here after Mr. Hence my word. I added this dot to the alpha. I say it's letters, but also it could have this period here, and that takes care of that Mr. with the period. I then say, sorry?
What's that one single quote? Is it like a...
Right. Right there. Totally right there. It's right there, I swear to God. Which one? This one? What's the line number?
So the first one, we're 24.
24. Yeah, that's a, what is it? Yes, that is a single quote.
We're going.
With a period.
Do we need that to...
So a word consists of any alphas, a single quote, or a period.
Stop it.
Pretty
Yeah, okay, so stop.
You need that for the hows.
Okay, so yeah, so this, exactly, yeah, it takes care of, like, how's going after that, and also the Mr. So, I'm sorry, I actually misspoke about this. So what this is allowing me to do is, it says, okay, I have letters, and then one of these possibilities also in here, after the letters. And then that takes care of, like, this and the single quotes. That's what that does. Just kind of like this, where we have the end punct is going to be, end punctuation is going to be one of, and it's either an exclamation point or a question mark. And I'll show you, I have something like a bit more complicated in here, a parse that I wrote that also shows a bit more. Yes?
So, wouldn't you call like one off there? Or would it try and match like your like apostrophe and period as a like 2-letter string, basically?
Say that again?
So like you're looking for either an apostrophe or a period. So wouldn't you call like one off on that?
Oh,
like,
instead of having it like this?
Yeah, because wouldn't that try and match like a string which is an apostrophe then a period after it?
So, interestingly enough, so I'll run this, and this will work correctly. We'll see how it comes out. But if you do, I'm trying to think. Honestly, I'm not sure.
So
I didn't try.
So it's the word consists of all the letters, apostrophe or period.
Yeah, plus one of these possibly. So we'll see. I'll run it, and then you'll see how it turns out. And we could try it the other way too.
It's like is alphas
Letter.
the string A through Z, like A B C D E?
Yes. Yeah. Upper and lowercase. So it's case insensitive in that one. So then you can do cool things like this, where you say, okay, my greeting is, and then you start combining all of these together into one larger element that you're going to work with. So I say greeting is salutation plus comma plus the greeting plus the end punctuation. So then, according to my slide, the next thing I do is I use it. So basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to go line by line in my hello strings. Now I'm going to run this function called parseString using greeting. So what it'll do is it'll basically parse the string looking for this greeting. So the way that I have everything configured in there. And then it's going to print each of the individual ones. So salutation, greeting, and end punctuation. So let's run that, see what it looks like. Boom. There we go. Get that bigger. Sweet. All right, there we go. Now you can see it. All right, so it's taken, right, so here's our input, right? Hello, comma, world, exclamation point, hi, comma, mom, etc. So we were telling it to suppress the comma. So we can see that in none of the output is there a comma. Now you're like, well, wait, there's a comma right there. But it's the way that it's putting everything together. So we have hello, world, hi, mom, good morning, Miss Crabtree. So also to explain something like that, right? So we were asking for the salutation, the greeting, and the end punctuation. So the salutation is whatever's first. So we got the hello, hi, good, yo, what up, how's it going? So that's bracketed, so that entire thing, right, is our salutation, hey, goodbye, etc. So it's breaking up the salutation and then the greeting. So it's working quite well. Perfect. So another example is this, and this is a parsing class that I wrote on this project called Banyan. So I really love Iron Man and the idea of Jarvis and you being able to like talk to your computer and have it do stuff. So I'm like, I'm going to write a program so I can talk to my computer and have it do stuff. But amazingly, voice control is not so easy to get. So I'm like, okay, well, on my way there, what I'm going to do is I'm going to write a parser so that if I speak to the computer in certain ways, then it'll parse that input and then start running commands based on what it is I'm telling it. So if I know what the input is going to be, and I don't have to worry about some random person coming up and telling my computer to do stuff and being able to handle that, then I can write a grammar that my computer will then understand and then start doing stuff. So what I did was, and this gets a little hairy here, but essentially this is my grammar right here in this section. Let me blow this up for you too. Turn on word wrap. So I want to suppress commas, so if for some reason I type in a command or I say a command or the Mac voice control interprets what I said as having a comma, it'll take out the comma. So in this instance I'm using again that literal that I was saying, so I'm like, look for a literal thing, call it a comma that looks like a comma. I then have a series of commands that I wanted it to be able to handle. So check, create, open, search, get, whatever, email, tweet. Right, because I want to tell it, hey, tweet, whatever the hell, and then it just tweets it. So then I have this idea called act on, which is, okay, well, it's going to run a command on what? So it's either going to be working on a project, a file, the web, so I have it so it could search the web, or locally. So what one of means is it's going to look next when it's parsing for one of those items. So I can just list everything out there, and it'll look for one of those items. I then have a command object that's one or more of the words that are composed of alphas, again with the single quote or a period. And then I want to track, like, well, when I was doing weather, I went to these, say, okay, well, what's the current weather, what's today's weather, what's tomorrow's weather, or weather forecast. So I'm like, okay, well, what time? Just in case I'm giving it a time command. And then the subject, which is literally subject. And I created that for email, so I could say like something that would say, you know, create project, or in this instance I would say like create email subject whatever. So then it could parse that and know that it wants to create a new email with a certain subject. So then what I'm doing, we come down here, so we have, y'all are gonna love me when that keeps happening. We have a number of, come on. Come back. Okay, here we go. All right. So I have a number of okay, let me back up. So as we saw in the Hello World example, where you start building up more grammar elements with combinations of what you created before, I'm doing that again here. So I wanted to create a command that say, okay, we'll create an open search. So it's going to have a command plus an act-on plus some command object. And then I say, okay, well, what does a GET request look like? So essentially what I'm building up is the way that I'm going to be talking to the computer to do certain things and how it parses what it is that I'm saying. So for instance, this GET, it's going to look for a command, it's going to look for the time, and then it's going to look for some object to operate on. Same thing with like email or tweet or launch some check. So then, and now I do have a bunch of nested if statements down here though. So you can't sometimes totally get away from the if statements, but I try to as much as possible. So what I'm going to do is, and I have my little error checking here, which is awesome. So what I'm doing is I'm going to basically run this parse string on the input that I'm entering in on this command right here. So I run it, I'm going to lower whatever it is, just in case. And then I say, okay, this W command is going to be the first part of the string that I parsed. So for instance, what that means is, right, so we have basically an array of what had been parsed. So I'm looking for the first element of the array. And that's my command. And the command is going to be, right, one of these things here, either check or create or open or search or blah, blah, blah. And you'll note that I do have upper and lower case there in the one of, because that is definitely case sensitive. I found that out. And I had to put the upper and lower case there because when I was using the voice dictation on Mac, I found it just automatically likes to uppercase or like proper case whatever it is that you're telling it. So I had to have my parser account for that. Hence you see everything upper and lower case. But if I was literally typing commands into this app, then I would type everything lowercase, so I had to be able to handle that too. So just had both of those cases.
Is there a way that you could just automatically lowercase all the input before?
Yes.
Sorry.
Yes, that is like way too smart. Come on, man. What the heck?
What are we, programmers?
I know, right? So I have a philosophy is make it work and then make it work better.
That's
so
the best
that would
way.
definitely be
That's
make
the best
it work
way
better.
to do it.
I'll do that next round. And you can, all that code for my Banyan app is available and you can go and laugh at it and tell me how bad I am. So, yes, pull requests are definitely welcome. So after I say, okay, so what is the command that I'm trying to run? Is it a create? Is it a check? No, whatever. Is it a open or search? I like the create here. So what I also want to do is, like, I create a lot of projects, and so in trying to automate some of my workflow, I wanted the thing to basically, if I said create new project with a name, it would create the folder for the project in a specific directory that I always put my projects in. Number two, it would then save it to a private repo in GitHub. So I could basically automate a lot of this workflow by talking to my computer. So I say, okay, well, if the command is a create, then do this create open search. So basically I'm using this grouping of grammar elements to parse the input. And I then say, okay, well, what am I acting on? Well, that's a project. So that's this next part of my grammar. So I'm saying do a command, you're acting on something. So in this instance, it's a project. I then have the computer ask me, hey, shall I store this project in a private repo? And I pick this awesome like female English accent voice that it asked me in. And so it's like, shall I store the project in a private repo? And I'm like, why, yes. So, so it'll put this as input, and then I can type yes. Or I can say, literally say to it, and I set up this crazy ass way to do that. I won't get into it, but later. If you're into electronics and soldering and stuff, I'll tell you how I did all this, like made it hands-free. Anyway, so it'll put this prompt out that says save in GitHub, and I'm like, yes. And so then what it does is it basically calls local project, which will create the local project. It'll create a new one. It'll save it in GitHub based on what I told it to, like if I told it to save it in GitHub, and then it'll be done. And so then it comes down here, and it's like, okay, great. Now if that fails, then it says, sorry, please enter a valid command. Or if it can't parse whatever it is that I told it to parse, it'll say, I don't know what you want me to do. And then it'll just keep going. So, oh, that's awesome again. I can see that it does that. Right. So that's the parsing, and that's PyParsing. I'm happy to answer more questions about that, because I'm sure you have some, and that's somewhat confusing. Let me put this back up. All right, so that's the hello world, that's parsing, user input. So web scraping. I threw web scraping in because I know everyone's like favorite topic is stealing data from the internet. So web scraping. Now I do not recommend actually using PyParsing for web scraping because frankly it's horrible to try and do that. There are other libraries. Beautiful Soup is a fantastic one in Python, but one of my favorites is Scrapy, whatever. What?
Beautiful Soup.
Your Beautiful Soup? Yeah, well, okay, so Scrapy is a framework for creating spiders. The only downside to Scrapy or Scrappy or however you pronounce it is that it only works with Python 2.7. So it doesn't work with new versions of Python, but it still works awesome. And so I will show you a web scraper with Scrapy, and I actually have all the code for this scraper on GitHub. It works. So the example scraper I'm going to show you is basically I put on LinkedIn one day. I'm like, hey, yeah, I'm getting 2 new Raspberry Pi 2s. I'm very excited. And this guy sent me a message, and he's like, hey, I'll send you, I have some old ones. Do you want them? And I'm like, hell yeah, I do. I don't know what I'll do with them, but I'll take them. So instead, he sent me a brand new one. And he's like, well, I hope you put it to good use. And I said, okay, well, what do you want? And he said, well, I need this. He's like, there's a website, and I'm not going to tell you what it is, so you can't get me in trouble. But he's like, so there's this website, and if I had all of the contacts from said website, then that would really help to jumpstart my business. And I'm like, done. So I wrote this web scraper that you will now get. I have taken out the URL, so you can, so there's less likelihood that you will know exactly what website I was scraping. But I had this code running on a Raspberry Pi 2 in my house for about 3 days. It was throttled, so you always have to throttle your spiders so you don't like denial of service a website, or they ban your IP and then you can't get any more data from them. And so I got about 47, actually specifically I have here. It ran for 3 days and I got 47,571 records off this website, delivered it to the guy. He was quite happy. So his website, or his business, got jump-started. So generally the way that you build the spiders with Scrapy is you specify your data, which is in this item class, and I'll show you all of this. You create your spider, amazingly in a spider class. You find your data elements using XPath selectors, which is also like sucky to do. But it's a lot easier if you can use Chrome developer tools or like Firefox web developer or the developer edition, because you can literally like inspect elements. And in certain instances, I think it's with Chrome, you could like right click and say give me the XPath like directly to this item, so it's a lot easier to get that. So definitely use the tools at your disposal. There's also Chrome and Firefox plugins that help you find the XPath of certain elements on a page. And all web spiders pretty much work that way. They target stuff by like class or ID certain elements, so like a div of a certain ID or a div of a certain class, and then that's where your data is. You then extract the data, and then you process it. However, in my instance, I literally, as records were coming in, I just took what I needed from them and spit them out. Like I appended them to a CSV. And so the CSV ended up being like 10 megs or something like that. Not huge, but enough to get his business going. I'm super happy. So here you go. And again, this is all on GitHub, all free for your not taking down any websites enjoyment. So Scrapey, and again, the reason that I love it, I have some code out there that will scrape certain parts of LinkedIn, which also, let me tell you, by the way, is whenever you're web scraping, you must always adhere to the terms of service of the website. So you might not want to use my code that will scrape LinkedIn, but it's another example of how you might build a web scraper. And in that one, basically I had to create not just a random number of seconds that I would be going from page to page, but I had to have a random number and then like some decimal, like some random decimal number, and then add those two, and then that's the number that I was using of a time delay between scraping pages. Because if you start scraping a website and they see literally, oh, hey, this IP address has a request literally every 7 seconds. Well, no one is that exact. Only machines. So they can tell based on like you're acting on their website that you're actually scraping their website. So you can't do exact seconds. You have to do seconds plus some like random decimal number after that. And then it has to also be random number of seconds, but not with Scrapey. With Scrapey, you have this great thing called auto throttle enabled. And all you say is true. And you say, okay, I want something that's between like 5 and 60 seconds, basically. And it'll completely randomize that. And that is awesome. Like, but I still have code that does the other way if you want it. This is the config file. So basically I'm telling it, okay, well, what's the spider module? Are cookies enabled? And I'm like, no. No, I don't want them, like less chance of them tracking me. And then I have just some URLs of where I'm keeping all of my files. And this was when I deployed onto my Raspberry Pi. That's where everything was going. So the way that I did this spider was I did it kind of in 2 rounds. So rather than going from necessarily page to page to page, I wrote 2 scrapers. The first one would gather up like literally all the URLs of all the profiles of these people I was trying to get off. And then the second spider actually ran through that list of URLs. So that list of URLs was like the 47,000 some odd. So then I went basically like page by page through that list of URLs and instead of literally trying to spider through the site, which became a lot easier. Now, I also have some cool things here. Downloader middlewares. So, other rules of the road when scraping websites is A, you want to make sure that your requests are as random as humanly possible, or yes, as humanly possible, not as machine as possible. And then, another thing you can do is you can switch up the user agent that the website will see when you're making these requests. So maybe it's Internet Explorer, maybe it's Firefox, maybe it's Firefox on like Windows NT or some crap, you know, like 6.0 or something that I guess like some government server has sitting on it. You know, so you have, where is that? I gotta show you this list. Oh, look at this. Oh, I'll find it in a minute. But anyway, so I have a whole list of, where's my utils? Here we go. Yeah. So I have this list of like all these different user agents here. Let's see, I got, yeah, basically like 773 different web browsers that could theoretically be coming from my IP address to scrape this website. And what's cool is that this one, basically by adding these few lines of code here, I can use like one of those. Like every time, basically every time it does a request, not only is it going to wait some random amount of time between 5 and 60 seconds, but it's going to keep giving it different user agents. So it looks like there's basically a crap ton of people over 3 days, at literally every hour of the day, like going to their website and looking at these different profiles of people. And no, I will just say this was not LinkedIn, by the way, when I was doing this. Based on my earlier comment, just going to put that out there. Okay, so the first thing, as I said on this slide, is you want to specify your data, which you use this item class. So you're basically subclassing scrapey.item, and you say, okay, what are the fields that I want in my item? So here I wanted, for an individual item, I have a name, what's their address locality, what's the region that they're in. So this is basically like city and state. It's just the website named it something differently. So I matched what my code said to the elements that I would be pulling from their page. What's the person's job title, and then give me their profile link. Now on the profile page, I want to get a bit more. So not only do I want their profile URL, and I want to give that to the guy. So basically it's like if there was additional information that the website may have had that I didn't give him automatically, because some elements are easier to extract from a page than others. And I'm like, all right, I'll get what I can, and then I'll give him the URL of this exact person's profile. So if he says, this person matches my criteria for contacting for whatever the hell, then he could then go to that person's profile and then get even more information and then contact that person. So I wanted the profile URL, give me their name, their firm, so now it starts looking like, you can start guessing like what kind of data that I'm scraping, whatever, fine. Firm, right, could be anybody. Position, practice areas, right? So anyway, so here are all of my fields that I want for these people. So now I have my spider. So I have amazingly taken out the URL of the exact website that I scraped. But anyway, so I give it the allowed domains, which is going to be the root URL from which you're scraping. And then I just have an empty array of my start URLs. So the first thing that I do is, yes, pay no attention to the screen, is basically just go through my, my CSV file, and then append every row to my start URLs array. And then for my parser, I start off with this block content. Oh, and look, I saved lawyers right here. I didn't cover that up at all. Awesome. Okay, so obviously I was getting lawyer information, but you still don't know exactly what website. Now I gotta go do this again. Anyway, so it's all good. So yes, so I'm getting lawyer data. I work with these people all day, so whatever. Anyway, so I create a new LP item, and then I say, okay, first I'm going to create this item profile link, and I'm going to use the XPath of a link. So literally a link, and the way you do it in Scrapey is you literally say just like ahref, right? So that's my link, and then extract that. Extract the first element of that link. Next is name, and then here's the XPath to the name. So it's a div with class BP listings result header, and then I want to get the text element that's within there. Then I extract the first element, and blah, 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 so on and so forth. So I get their locality, I get their region, I get their job title, and then I want to yield back this item element. Because then that is handled by the pipelines. The pipelines basically say how to handle the, whatever it is that I'm sending it. So for the profiles one, which is this spider, once it goes through this, and here I have like, hey, give me here all of the different elements that I wanted, here's all the XPath to them, et cetera, et cetera. These practice areas, some of them were easy, some were not. Then send it to this pipeline. So here you define how you're basically going to process that. And so what I wanted to do was I wanted to fully clean it up, and then I write it out to a CSV. And just like any Python program, I have my methods here. So here's my cleaning item. I needed to make sure that it was encoded correctly for me to be able to deal with. So I'm encoding everything UTF-8. I then start replacing all sorts of different stuff. I replace that. I take out white space. I'm replacing tab characters and new line characters, because basically what I want is just a straight up string, and I return that. So that's all the cleaning that I had to do of this data. Sometimes, depending on where you're getting data from, it could be a lot worse than that. But that's all I needed to clean it up, which is cool. And then I have my little 2-line write it out to my CSV file. So that was that like giant CSV file that I was creating for him. It's right here. So then, and then literally, I mean, that's it, right? So I ran that, and then that would run, and it took about 3 days, and I got 47,000 some odd lawyer profiles. Now they all know it's lawyer profiles. And it's recorded and everything on TV, so awesome.
I'll bleep it out.
Yeah, every time I say lawyer, like blah 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 blah. No, it's all good. I'm not too worried. If they come after me, they can try. That's not a challenge. By the way, all right. So that's all I have for this. I'm around for any questions after the next talk. If y'all want to ask about web scraping, how not to get caught, I have other tricks on. I mean, like how not to get blocked by a website when you're doing it, is what I totally meant to say. Or how to be nice to people's sites when you're web scraping. Also, I'm doing a couple of data wrangling classes with Python. So this first one is through this great company called District Data Labs that does a lot of data-focused in-person trainings. So that's the first one I'm doing, May 9th, and that's an in-person training. And then I'm also setting up another one with a company called Data Society, and all of their training is online and on demand, hence it's online. And anyway, this is me. I'm a hacker of things. I say I'm a hacker of things because I write like, most of the code that I write, they're not giant applications. It's either like web scraping or one-off scripts to be cleaning data and a lot of stuff. So if you have questions about any of that, I'm definitely available. And that is my talk. Thank you very much.